Welcome everybody to Iowa Ideas. Our session today is called the Push for Automation. My name is Craig Jamolis. I'm the managing editor of the Gazette newspaper here in Cedar Rapids, which means essentially I run the daily operations of the newsroom. We have a good panel of experts in automation who live this pretty much day in and day out. So let me quickly introduce our panelists, and then we'll get right into it. Jeff Sfredo is the Vice President of Automation and Sales for Van Meter Incorporated here based in Cedar Rapids, and I should point out also is an employee-owned company, just like the Gazette. In that position, he and others work with companies to evaluate and implement automation solutions. We also have with us Hank Norman, who's president of Ramco Innovations in Des Moines, or I should say West Des Moines, also specializing in working with companies on automation solutions. And we have Mike O'Donnell, who is the director of manufacturing extension partnerships at Iowa State University under the SEERS program, and I always get this mixed up what SEERS stands for, but correct me, I think that stands for Center for Industrial Research and Services. And getting the thumbs up, apparently I do remember that. And they work again with partners and companies around the state to provide automation solutions. And they've been doing that for early 60s, since the early 60s. So this is kind of old hat to them to some degree. And so welcome panelists, and we're looking forward to your expertise and sharing your knowledge with us today. I'm going to start off with what seems like a deceptively simple question. And Mike, if you can get us started on this, and others feel free to jump in. But my question is just, what are we talking about with automation? I know in my industry, when somebody asks, what is news? And they ask that of 100 different journalists, they're going to get 100 different answers. And I think automation is kind of the same thing. But I think what people think when they think automation is the first image that comes to mind is robots, robots doing welding or painting cars or whatever, assembly cars. But it's broader than that. And Mike, I wonder if you could just kind of take a stab at trying to help us, and other people feel free to jump in here as well, about what is automation when we talk about industries, companies looking for more automation to help be successful.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm sure Jeff and Hank will have some nuances to add into this. In my opinion, a lot of people think of automation as robots, right? But it's so much more. Robots are a huge part of automation, but it's other things like using sensors and data to make decisions effectively. It's adding in different types of support for people on the shop floor. It's automating information exchanges. So based on certain information, taking an action automatically. It's essentially all the work that people don't need to do because it can be simplified into relatively easy to understand and act actions that a system can do instead of a person. Jeff or Hank, any additions to that?
I'd just add a couple things. One, I would say that automation is great, and the first thing I think that needs to be discovered before you decide in a path is really what it is that where are you not meeting your goals and objectives, your KPIs, and what is it that you're wanting to or needing to improve. And it involves what I feel are three things really: people, processes, and technology. Automation technology will help get you there if that's the right answer. It might be changes to your process. It might be changes with how you're deploying your people. So we try to help people figure that out and then decide what makes the most sense moving forward after we get to that point. Unless you're already there, then we can move in that direction with you. But I think it's really important that you do that. You figure that piece out first.
In terms of how widespread this is in Iowa, uh, and it touches pretty much every industry in some way, shape, or form. I wonder if Hank or Jeff, if you, from your perspective, um, how widespread is this in Iowa? Is it really affecting pretty much every company looking at technological solutions to help their business?
Yeah, I would say it's statewide. What level of engagement is very widespread. So
Mhm.
you could have one company that's been doing these things for decades, literally, and others that are just getting started, and they may have had an initial conversation with Cirrus, for example. There are also different types of industries that are applying different types of applications. But when it comes to interest, it's definitely there. It's across the state, all 99 counties. And again, Mike and Jeff could tell you the same thing. It's very widespread at this point, but adoption is definitely all over the board at this point.
Well,
I'd throw in there,
Yeah.
why it's of interest across the 99 counties is because it's of interest across the globe. In many of the customers that we work with in Iowa, the world continues to shrink, and so if you're competing on a global scale, you have to do the things that are going to enable that, and so I think this is a key element that would allow you to do so better, more effectively.
Well,
And we've been
that kind of
studying
gets to the
data.
question I was going to ask next about why would a company want this? And pretty much anybody can answer this question, but why would a company want to look at better sensors or robots in some cases, or technological advances that would help them meet their goals? I mean, why would a company want that? This kind of gets into a question that I think Hank had suggested, which is, what challenges are companies facing in the manufacturing industry right now? And so that's kind of good segue into that as well. What
Workforce
challenges are people facing that in the global economy that they would need to look at? Hey, we've done it this way in the past. Maybe there's a better way of doing it in the future.
Well, workforce isn't a new topic for anyone on this
Yeah.
call, I'm sure. So that's in most cases the number one priority. They're saying, hey, we're struggling. We can't find the workforce. We may need to turn to automation. And there are some statistics in our state, that say over half of our manufacturing comes from rural areas. And those are the areas that are losing population. So for them to remain competitive longer term, they have to turn to automation because the numbers aren't in their favor. Worked with one company that they said 60% of their workforce is over age 50. So within 10 years or so, they're going to have a pretty serious succession transition plan for their workforce. And if they don't start turning to automation in the next year or two, it's going to be a struggle for them to remain at certain levels of productivity. So I'd say workforce concerns are at the top of the list. Supply chain obviously has created some issues. Again, another topic that isn't a big surprise to anyone in this call, but controlling your workflow via automation can help alleviate some supply chain issues. So to me, those are a couple of the top ones there.
Yeah, I think I'll throw in, manufacturers know that the gap in people right now that we're experiencing isn't a temporary thing from COVID. It is a population issue, and in manufacturing, this is a 10 or 20-year problem that we need to get more product out with the same amount of people or less people. The other thing that I think you need to talk about in automation is cost. Everybody in the world is automating, and especially even low-cost countries are doing a lot of automation. So if you're not moving into that space long term, you're also going to have challenges in terms of cost competitiveness too.
Speaking of that, the widespread nature of this, Mike, you have some statistics, I think, in terms of what your surveys have shown in terms of how widespread this is, how many companies, percentage of companies that in the Midwest who've gone this direction. Others are considering it. Do you want to go over those a little bit to just kind of talk about kind of what's happened already and what the future is going to look like in terms of companies being interested in this?
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize how large manufacturing is in Iowa. It is the number one industry in Iowa. We have about 3,500 manufacturers here in the state. Our most recent survey says about a quarter of all manufacturers have gone highly automated, right? They've implemented significant automation across their business. And another quarter is on the path there. So you're looking at thousands of manufacturers here in the state who have implemented automation, whether that's sensors, data, robotics, you name it. But it is, thousands of businesses across the state have implemented it. And there's a lot of really great efforts going on across the state to increase that too, and help the smaller companies make sure that they can keep up and automate also.
Yeah, I want to talk about state support here in a little bit, and we can devote some time to that. But I'm glad you touched on that because we will want to come back to that. One question I have, and I think a lot of people would have, is when they think of automation and trying to succeed without hiring a whole bunch more people. The concern always comes out about what this means for workers. And it's almost kind of ironic we're having that discussion right now when everybody's looking for employees in some way, shape, or form. And I just had a session on this yesterday, actually, on all the incentives going out there to try to find more people to fill our needs. But there is some concern, obviously, and it's been mentioned here that this is a long-term thing. It's not necessarily the pandemic exacerbated it, but in some way it's going to probably continue for a while. And we're still in the mode where I think if you're in Iowa and you want to work, you will find a job. It may not be your dream job, but there's something out there with your name on it if you want to work. So it's ironic that we're talking about this now, but I think to some people, the automation is almost like a boogeyman where it's like, oh my God, what happened to those workers at the auto plants that are now being replaced with robots? But it's not quite that simple. And I just wonder if Mike and some others can weigh in this as well. When somebody chooses to go down this path, what does that mean for the people who are already there? Does it mean that they get laid off? Does it mean they get moved into some other jobs? Kind of what has your experience been?
So I'll throw out two kind of big picture things and then let Jeff and Hank get into some specifics. So from a big picture, one important thing is the research out there shows that individual businesses who've implemented automation over the long run are more successful and have more people than businesses who don't. So from a business standpoint, your longevity is tied to implementing technology like this. So if you don't, you're probably going to struggle with competitiveness and all those jobs would be gone. So that's part of it. The other side is when we're short on people, right? Automation and technology is a huge way to help people stop doing the things they don't want to do, right? The dirty jobs, the dangerous jobs, the boring jobs, and put those people to good use doing things that add more value for themselves and for the company. And more often than not, adding that automation creates better careers for people. It creates new ways to learn skills. It creates better jobs. So the successful companies in automation make that promise up front is I'm bringing in technology not to lay you off, but to find a better job for you.
I would agree with everything you just said, Mike. And I would just add again that underscoring your comment that by doing so enables a business the ones we've worked with, what we have seen is it enables them to be stronger to ensure that the jobs they have for the people that are there will continue to be there and then more, because it just strengthens their ability to compete. And, the other element, I think, when you asked earlier, why? Well, workforce is the big one today. I mean, that's top of mind for everybody. But also just the agility, the finicky or I don't know, finickiness is a word, but the markets, the people, the consumers, they're what they want changes fairly quickly. And depending on what you're producing, you need to be able to adjust and shift to market demands. And it's a lot easier when you're automated and your controls and your architecture can make those changes without massive larger scale changes that you can adapt and adopt to the market needs faster. And so, when you do that, again, you need people to help run the business, and as Mike said, they can be doing so in higher value added roles, business will flourish faster.
Yeah, I think that myth is diminishing pretty quickly. I mean, most companies are pretty well aware, and most employee base are for the most part well aware that it's not displacing jobs. And as Jeff and Mike mentioned, it's looking to build more. Instead of 40 widgets a day, you're looking to build 400 widgets a day because of demand. And everyone realizes that we can't grow that pace without some sort of automation. Another area that automation has entered employers is via safety applications. So no one would really argue that either. If we're bringing in automation to enhance the level of safety in our entity, then we're all for that. So automation has a little bit of a bad rep historically. I think that's going away, especially when you combine all these factors together.
There's some thought out there that companies, manufacturing companies, people who employees have been there a long time, are getting close to retirement, the concept of going to work for a company and you're there for 30 years, 40 years, seems to be going away really quickly. And there's some thought out there that younger generations don't see the same thing when they go to work for a company. It may be only for a short time before they move to some other company and not see that kind of a long-term commitment to a company or vice versa. Obviously, there is the concern about safety, that you bring up, and so that may be, I think, another field of this that it gets back to workforce where you can't find enough people, and the people you have are retiring or close to retirement, and it's hard not only to replace them because of the numbers of people applying for jobs, but the people applying for jobs may not want that kind of job that you had available to begin with in the first place. And so it gives as companies even more motivation to automate. I do want to talk about some specific examples. So, talk about what do we mean by automation. And I brought up earlier with the panel, I just kind of find this fascinating. I learned something on this. Starbucks earlier this month announced that some things they were doing to re-engineering the company. Of course, Starbucks has all kinds of other problems to deal with right now, but I found this kind of interesting here that I didn't realize this, that a lot of the profits that Starbucks makes is because people order these highly concocted drinks with have a bunch of ingredients in them. And that's been their most profitable sector. But it takes a long time to make those drinks because of all these different ingredients. And so they have showed some, re-engineered their process, their drink process. And they can now, they had a demonstration where it took 2 Starbucks baristas 35 seconds to make a mocha frappuccino with whipped cream, as opposed to the 87 seconds it would normally take. You wouldn't think that seconds matter that much, but that's where most of the profits come from. So now they can make it in less than half the time that they used to make it, and so presumably they could make twice as much. But that same kind of thing is happening in Iowa on a different scale. And I think, Jeff, you supplied this example of a company that Van Meter worked with. You wouldn't necessarily think of a baker as being somebody who would benefit from this, but I thought that was interesting. the West Bend company. Do you want to talk about that in some detail?
Sure.
Just kind of what happened there?
Yeah. So we did work with this company, and we do have rights to use their name. It was Country Made, and they make pastries for the fundraising efforts that people can sell their product to raise money. And they're an employee-owned company as well. And they called us in, and we worked with them. And they did have an automation layer already. So they had an automation control architecture that was running machines, but they were having issues with waste. They were having issues with throughput. And so what we did, once we worked with them to identify like where they were having these shortfalls, it really was more of a software technology that we laid over top of the hardware infrastructure. And that enabled them to go from making 6,800 pieces a day to 22,000 pieces a day in the same 8-hour shift with the same number of people. So it addressed the issues we set out for with them to solve. And the other byproduct was that being there in the food industry, it's a regulated process. And so FDA has requirements, and it also enabled them to take the manual nature of documentation and recipe management and tracking and tracing out of the hands of people, and it was all now automated and done through software, and freed up people to be doing other more valuable jobs. It was more accurate, it was more consistent. So there is a video out there. If you search Van Meter Country Made, you will see this, and it's public domain. So that was I don't know how much more detail you want, but I think that's enough probably for the call. If anybody has interest, you can contact them, you can contact us. But it was a great example of everything we just talked about, and redeploying workers to be more value add roles, and using in that element software technology on top of a hardware architecture to deliver those results. One thing I would quickly add to the comment right before we moved into this is we talked about changing roles. Mm-hmm. I would just highlight that it's not technically considered automation, but there is technology available today that as people change roles, there is technology that can be applied to help them come up to speed much faster, to complement training or augment training. And it's in our realm. It's helping companies be more productive and optimizing their processes, but it's technically not automation, but it facilitates the manufacturing process. So I just want to make sure that if that doesn't get brought up at some point, that people are aware, and there are ways to help reduce time to value for new employees. And so.
Thank you. Hank, I know your company works in several states in the Midwest to help automation solutions. Has that been more or less your experience? I mean, if a company says, I want to automate something, that kind of what happens when somebody says, yeah, I want to take advantage of this? What is your process for solving the problem? I mean, do you do a walkthrough, or how do you decide what solutions work best?
It's a good question. It's best if we're on site. If we can actually see the application firsthand. Sometimes we can go virtual with that, but it's best to see the operation up close and personal, get a feel for it, try to figure out what they're doing. Talk about challenges. Jeff mentioned earlier, what are their goals? Is it to reduce waste, increase productivity, enhance safety? All could be everything combined into one. But then try to get that dialed in, find a solution. A lot of times we like to bring it back to our place. So we have a proof of concept center here. So if they're doing quality control, for example, or they're inspecting parts, we like to bring it back to our place, bring it in the proof of concept center, prove it out. If it's a vision system or if it's a sensing application, bring it back, potentially video for them, show them working in action. Say, is this what you're looking to accomplish? Is this kind of where your goals were? and then move forward from there and possibly look at recommending a formal solution and getting up and running in their facility. So it depends. Everyone is different for sure, but that would be an ideal scenario where we see it on their facility, grab a couple parts. If it's, as an example, if it's a part inspection application, bring it back, test it out so that they're not in a live environment. We can set it up in a test environment and then get it back into their facility and up and running. So.
And also, just to continue this a little bit, say I'm a company, I'm interested in this, and I wanted to have somebody look at that. So you would ideally do some kind of a walkthrough and see it in action. You would test it out to make sure it's going to work. And then what do you do afterwards? I mean, do you follow up on that, or do you just say, oh, there you go? Or do you follow up on that at some point and say, is it working, or do we need to make adjustments, or kind of what happens after the fact, after it's launched?
It sort of depends on what capability they have. If sometimes they want to tinker on their own, but in most cases, they view us as kind of an extension of their engineering team. So we'll send some field engineers out into the facility and get it going for them, help them do the installation and, kind of some initial testing. And then again, it kind of depends on their capability. If they have a team of engineers, they run with it. Otherwise, we're sort of involved through the initial phases of installation.
Hey, Craig, can I add something to that?
Sure, yeah.
And I'm only saying this because I don't know if the people that are tuned in here, some of them, we've met with customers where they know they need something, but they don't know what.
Right.
And so I would say, in the example Hank described, that it sounded a little more like maybe, hey, I kind of know it's that line, or it's that machine, it's this part of our process, and they lead you to that. And agree with everything Hank said. You need to see that, you need to understand that. But I would just throw out to anybody on the call here that maybe want to get behind this and take advantage of the things we're talking about, but I don't know how to get started. What do we do? Because we hear that, and I would just say in that case, to your point, Craig, some people call it a Gemba walk. It just means that you're going to go out and you're going to survey the process with the customer and ask a lot of questions. And I always say peel that onion till you get to the points where you understand and it resonates with them that yes, that's where my pain is. That's where my KPIs are not being met, or that's causing this KPI. Maybe it's a downstream thing, and you zero in on where might it be best to look to make an investment, prioritize that. What's the ROI based on everything? And maybe there's 3 or 4 things. What's the most pressing one? And by achieving success there, maybe some downstream things get better. But just want to point out that if there's fear of I don't know how to get started, we can help you.
Which leads into a question I was going to ask. I think both for Hank and Jeff and Mike, if you have something to weigh in here, what are some of the positive improvements that have come out from projects you've been working on that companies benefit? I mean, what are some of the improvements and positive improvements that have happened that you're impressed by in projects you've been involved in?
I've seen enhanced focus on quality control. Companies are much more cognizant of it, and especially because of supply chain and workforce shortages, those 2 factors combined, you have to focus on quality. They were historically there, but it's just an enhanced level. Safety, as I mentioned before, companies are more focused on safety again because you're already short workers. The last thing you want to do is go down with an injury. Companies have always been focused on it, but just an enhanced level of safety there. And then also automation, and Jeff and Mike can talk about it as well, but has brought on a lot of data. So as you're tracking with automation, you're gathering a lot of data that you might not have had otherwise with a manual process. So with more data comes better projections. You're able to track those KPIs that Jeff mentioned. Data has skyrocketed. Now, we don't have enough people to analyze the data yet, and we don't know exactly how yet, but those are some of the things that we're working on. And it's certainly going to be an area of focus going forward. So I would say quality control, safety, and data, and better projections and information are certainly some gains that we've seen via automation, and just the manufacturing sector in general has gained from those three areas.
Jeff, do you have anything else to add to that?
I do. I was going to pause in case if Mike had anything, and then I could comment either way.
Yeah, I'll just throw out the other thing that we see with automation is relief for companies since the pandemic hit, and really going into the pandemic. Manufacturers have struggled, right? When we all went remote, manufacturers didn't. They were there every day. They've been through roller coasters of demand, of product showing up, of not showing up, where they can't physically get enough stuff out of their plant on any day for the last 2.5 years here. When they put in technology that helps them double their output on a specific step, and everybody can finally step back and breathe and work on some of the other stuff, the look on their face of feeling under control again, that alone makes the automation worth it.
For sure. Where I was going to add some comment was to Hank's, his comment around data, and that it's just this morning before this call, I was on another call with some key suppliers that we work with around that very topic of data and analytics. And, the fact that the technology that generates the data and stores the data and analyzes the data is much more sophisticated and has greater horsepower than it has in years past to crunch the data and to produce valuable information from it is still something that is a bit of a mystery to some and to many, and that there is incredible information that can be obtained to help drive, and I know everybody's probably heard this in the trade magazines and it sounds cliche, but to use that data to drive information to make better decisions, and it is a reality. But sometimes we work with customers to figure out, like, what would the data be that would help you do that? And then how do you capture that? How do you generate that data so that the tools that can analyze it and produce good information can make it a benefit, and you can monetize that to your benefit, is something that I think you should be aware of, and that there's technology and algorithms that can make that a reality for you.
Now, the state of Iowa has gotten behind this quite a bit. And Hank, I'll ask you this question in a minute here, but they provided all kinds of grants to support automation throughout the state. And just this last week, the White House announced that $96 million more is coming into Iowa. And part of that, I'm not sure how much of that, but part of that will go to push for, I think, loans to encourage automation. So it sounds like that the state support is only going to increase. Hank, do you want to walk us through what you know about state support? I'll ask Mike the same question here, but I know that's a topic that's near and dear to you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Jeff and I were on the Advanced Manufacturing Group. It was a state group that helped bring basically automation awareness. And this started pre-COVID. This was end of 2019. Just started to work and say, hey, we're going to need automation. We realize that we're going to see some potential shortfalls in productivity, and we have some labor shortages coming. Well, when COVID hit, it just fast tracked all of that. We said, okay, we really need all this now. So the state worked with a third party, gathered a tremendous amount of data, talked across the entire state, gathering information, saying, okay, what do companies need? What kind of assistance would best fit them? And really what it came down to with this Manufacturing 4.0 plan, which had a whole host of offerings, but one of the offspring from that was the Manufacturing Grant Program, or Automation Grant Program. And it started with small entities, employee size 3 to 75. And that was in the form of a matching grant, a 1-to-1 grant. So if they put up 75,000, they could get that matched by the state for another 75,000. And when you look at $150,000 automation project, that's huge for a small employer who we were just talking about. It's going to be faced with some succession planning issues, workforce shortages in general. 150,000 gets them going, gets them rolling. It might say, okay, I was debating starting that project, but now I'm gonna give it a go because I'm getting support from the state. What we looked at was large companies already down the path. The large companies were also saying, hey, we already have this, maybe not fully figured out, but we have the resources to do this and we're already doing it. These small companies are very much a part of our supply chain. We need them to automate. So yes, please help them out. So that rolled out. Early adoption was great. To get the grant, you actually had to go through a serious assessment. So they worked with Mike's team to do essentially an automation assessment, see if the application fit well. So there was an early filtering process, and Mike's team filled up immediately with requests, which was really cool to see. All these companies that were stepping forward saying, thank you, let's get started, let's try to figure it out. Mike can comment on this, but he's also mentioned that even companies that didn't receive grant funding learned a lot. They were able to go through that initial assessment, figure out if it worked for them or not, and move forward. So that was 3 to 75 employees. The next tier of companies said, hey, we're interested in this as well. Is there a larger grant program? So I was really proud of our state for stepping forward with this. They launched another program, leveraged some federal dollars, and there was a grant program for employee sizes 76 to 250, a similar type grant program where it was matching funds for automation projects. Both the large and small company and grant programs filled up. So they were fully subscribed. Those are running. Where the state is excited about it is that there's full reporting on these. So they're going to show, hey, we reduce waste, we increase productivity. We're able to create jobs in some cases. So they have full data on this to support automation and also support future projects or plans as well. So really exciting program. Moved quickly. Again, our state is works with manufacturers because they know how important it is. That Jeff and Mike mentioned it, but it's our largest driver of GDP here in the state. So automation is going to play a huge part of that, and the grant program was very key to that. And Mike and Jeff have more thoughts. I just wanted to give some background there.
Yeah, I'll jump back to that report that Hank talked about at the beginning. What's exciting to me is this is how a state's supposed to work, right? So several years ago, the state brought together public and private entities to really look at what is going on in manufacturing, where's it going, where are the challenges, and set out their priorities and said, here's the 5 main areas that we want to make progress in, and here are the specific goals we have in those areas. And everything you've seen that has been coming out in the last few years has been directly related to that plan. So the grants that you saw were specifically aimed at moving adoption among the smaller manufacturers. So they had a plan, they had input from a lot of people, and now they're going after it, and it's making a difference. We've had hundreds of manufacturers go through this process, small manufacturers who really historically have not implemented technology and are making movement. And Iowa is really a model for that in finding ways to help those small manufacturers figure out how to pull out some of that risk so that they can make that decision to go. If you're a manufacturer with 50 people and you invest $250,000, it better work or else you're in deep trouble. And this process helped them get enough certainty and risk reduction where they can take action, and it's working. Companies are implementing new technologies and they're improving.
Mike, I wonder if you could take a minute to explain CIRRUS. Again, I think that stands for a Center for Industrial Research and Service. That's what my notes say. That has been around for almost as long as I've been alive. I'm older, but not much. I don't think a lot of people know that it exists or how to take advantage of it. So I wonder if you could just walk us through a little bit about what Cirrus is and kind of what it's been doing. It's been active in all counties in Iowa. How do people take advantage of that if they want to find out more?
Yeah. In the big picture, Cirrus is an element of Iowa State University, and our job is to make industry in Iowa better. We do that through a lot of different programs and a lot of activities. We primarily serve small to mid-sized businesses. So companies with 30 to 500 employees tends to be where we spend most of our time. And yeah, we're hitting 60 years. Next spring, we'll hit our 60th anniversary. And we've been around for a long time because we focus on what the companies need, help them kind of make sense of the world as it's changing, and implement change that sticks with them. So if you do want to reach out to us, please go to our website. It's the best place to learn about us. It's Cirrus, ciras.iastate.edu. And on our contact page, we've got our account managers regionally who you can reach out to.
Hey, Craig.
Yeah, go ahead.
I had a thought as Hank was going through the money that was made available by the state that, and Hank, maybe correct me here, but I know there was a significant investment, I think, that our governor authorized for our network infrastructure. And I bring that up because more and more technology moves to the cloud, and is our infrastructure gets stronger and more robust. That'll be a great thing. As far as the manufacturing side of a business goes, that's a bit of a newer concept versus the IT side of the house. And I just want to, a very important thing and a topic you hear a lot in the news is cyber threats and hacks. And if that is inhibiting anybody from implementing technology because of the concern that it might introduce a vulnerability or a risk to the business, that we can address that as long as we design for it and we plan for it and we have good processes in place to mitigate the risk. I guess I'm just saying, don't let that be a holdup for trying to gain efficiencies and improvements through the implementation of technology. We can help you implement it in a way that will protect you from that. And just didn't know if that was on anybody's mind, but it's a big topic and we address it quite a bit. We can help you figure that out. So just want to take that off the table if that's an issue for someone.
Yeah. That was another thing I was really proud of the state for. Governor Reynolds launched that $100 million rural broadband grant. That's a mouthful.
Yeah.
But in rural areas, that was a big concern. They said, okay, if we're going to be implementing automation, we need better IT infrastructure. And so we need better connectivity. And then as Jeff mentioned, cybersecurity is a huge risk, especially when some of these smaller companies don't have, a very robust IT department, if at all. So really coming together as a state there will be important for us to share ideas, share defense mechanisms to guard against cybersecurity issues, especially as data starts moving more rapidly.
Yeah, I do think that people are concerned about cybersecurity just across the board. Anything that's vulnerable to that is, I think people I am concerned about it in our company as well. So I'm sure that's ubiquitous for everybody. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about kind of what the future of manufacturing is going to look like, and also tied with that, what does the future of automation look like? And those are probably tied very closely together. But specifically, to begin with, Jeff and Hank, do you have any idea of where manufacturing may be headed in the next couple of years? I can't help but look at, we're all worried about recruiting right now, and yet storm clouds are gathering on the economy, and interest rates are going up. They're probably going to go up again. And if I owned a company, I would probably say, maybe now is not the time to invest and take out a big loan. Let me see how things are going to shake out. Um, but I'm just kind of curious what you see out there from what you're seeing in terms of how manufacturers are approaching the future.
I think some of them are looking at more reshoring and onshoring efforts. They want to control their supply chain. They were burned by, having maybe too narrow of a supply chain. So, if it was overseas, they might have had freight concerns. So to bring that back to the U.S. or even locally in Iowa, I think is going to be a pretty big initiative. Again, just to control that supply chain, so you're not so dependent on maybe foreign entities, for example. I do have to bring it up. The Supplier Connection Portal was launched as a part of that. Mike, thank you. As a part of the 4.0 plan, or the manufacturing 4.0 plan. What we found out was there were some cases where some large OEMs were looking outside the state or even outside the country when there could have been a supply partner right down the road from them. And that was the case in some areas. So the state set up the Supplier Connection Portal. It's on iowamfg.com. You can go there, and if you're a manufacturer, you can get registered there and essentially make those more nearby connections, and again, get a little bit more control over supply chain, maybe find a supply partner or potentially a customer through that. So again, I think that's going to be a pretty large trend that'll emerge of just reshoring and onshoring back to Iowa, back to the country here.
Jeff, are you seeing more or less the same thing?
Say again, Craig?
I was just curious if you're seeing more or less the same thing. What do you think of the future of manufacturing is going to look like?
Yes, agree with everything Hank said. I feel like reshoring has been a term that's been in play for like the last 10 years, and I feel now it's really happening. And documented cases where that's happening. Obviously, the pandemic has really accelerated that behavior. From a technology standpoint, I would go back to a little bit of what we talked about earlier is, I think the analytics piece in data is money. And, figuring out how you monetize all that data that you have, I think will be a differentiator. Which again, having a robust network to support the transition of data, the movement of data, the storage of data will be important, or even more important. But I think figuring that out, once you've applied the automation technology and then leveraging it to get the most out of it through harnessing the data and making good decisions with it to generate revenue for you, I think is an area that there's a lot of opportunity and advancement moving forward.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'll go a little further past that in agreeing with them. I think manufacturers aren't slowing down anytime soon from what we're seeing here. The next thing that we're going to start to see is the impact of the CHIPS Act, right? And the concerted federal effort to reshore silicon chips and build factories here in the US. That's going to create some really complex changes over the next 5 years. And Craig, you talked at the beginning about younger people not wanting to work in manufacturing. I think what you'll see is younger people don't want to stand there and load machines all day. But that's not what manufacturing's turned into. It's the opportunity for young people to come in and find a network of wildly complex machines connected to each other with data and apps they can develop and all sorts of things. I think what you're going to find is manufacturing could be the cool tech place to work in the future. So as we move further and further in that automation path, what it means to work in manufacturing is going to change dramatically, I think.
I agree. I think we need to, sorry.
No, go ahead, Hank.
I think we need to continue raising the awareness of automation. We have a group of high school students in here today, and we have one of our senior automation engineers just showing them how it works, giving them an idea. It's amazing when we interview somebody and they come through the walls and say, I had no idea this was out there. So when these students start coming into these technical fields, it's important for them to see the opportunities are out there. Like Mike mentioned, you're getting to work on some pretty big projects and very impactful projects as well. You're feeding the universe in some cases, if it's food production, for example.
I was just going to make a comment, building on what Mike said, that because of the cloud and the capabilities that are now available to us, we're seeing larger automation manufacturers opening up hubs in the cloud where they're kind of crowdsourcing, if you will, allowing their partners and potentially customers that can create apps for their automation process to reside in their hub in the cloud. And because they manage it, the apps like for Apple have to be produced and have guidelines that they have to work within. So there's consistency in quality. But I see, I guess capabilities around the technology just expanding at an exponential rate, much faster than we've seen in the last 10 years, 15 years, because of this capability that is going to be afforded to us that all of manufacturers will be able to take advantage of. And I don't think it's going to be specific to any one brand or automation supplier. I think we'll see this throughout.
Mike, related to this, I wonder if you would talk a little bit about kind of what the future of automation is going to look like. I think big things like robots have gotten a lot of attention in the past, but obviously it's broader than that. And I know that some of it is picking up some other steam as well. I just kind of wonder if you could talk to us about getting out your crystal ball a little bit, looking what automation is going to look like in the future.
I would say simpler, cheaper, faster, and more flexible are probably the key things to expect. And we're already seeing that, right? The cost of starting to automate your factory with things like collaborative robots has dropped dramatically. You don't need to necessarily know detailed technical coding languages to program a robot. You can simply use drag and drop programming with flowcharts like kids learn in school these days. So I think it is going to be something that everybody in every company will have access to. It will be easier to install it. It will be easier to change it, and it will be easier to keep it running for a longer period of time. So we're seeing the first sights of that, and it's getting more connected and smarter as we go. So I'm excited to see where it goes.
And this is a question for probably all three of our panelists here. Do you foresee the demand for workers still being a thing, for years to come? Despite automation, that manufacturers are still going to want people, hiring people. Maybe the jobs look different in some way, but do you think that demand will stay with us for a while, or do you think that companies will say, "I'm going to replace somebody with a machine, and I don't need as many people"?
I see that staying and growing. And to Mike's data point earlier, I mean, the companies we see taking advantage of technology, building a stronger business around that. Usually their margins are higher. They're able to compete more effectively, which means growth. And when they grow, it could be more automation, and it's probably going to need more people to support that additional business as well. So that's what we've seen so far. I don't know why that would not continue into the future.
Yeah, I'll just throw out there. I completely agree with Jeff. Everything we see says it's going to keep growing. And I think it's going to put more pressure on the people moving into manufacturing, because not only do you need to know the really hard stuff about how to make things, but you also need to know the technology side of it as well at all levels of the organization.
It's interesting that so many people entering the workforce now, they've all grown up with cell phones, and that's been part of their lives, and technology has been a bigger part of people's lives than it ever was for me. I mean, I grew up in the days before TVs had remote controls, and so that's obviously becoming a bigger part of everybody's job. And my guess is that 5 years from now or 10 years from now, or even maybe next year, a lot of jobs in manufacturing may be things that we have never heard of before, that are created because we have automation. And I think the hope it is that would attract some more people to manufacturers. Obviously, Iowa manufacturers, half of them are in rural areas. There's all kinds of challenges there, not only the population drop in most of the counties that are rural into urban areas, but there's also a workforce housing shortage and broadband and all these things that need to be overcome. But it's such a central part of Iowa's economy that you guys are involved in, and so I'm very glad of that. I know we are going to come to an end here in a few minutes for our session. So I wanted to thank all the panelists for taking time out of a busy day. Everybody's busy these days, so I very much appreciate the fact that you're joining us today and sharing your expertise with us. I especially want to make a shout out to our sponsor for Iowa Ideas. The main sponsor is ITC Midwest. And all of us who lived through the derecho, we lost our power for days on end. Companies like ITC were very involved in rebuilding the grid and making it so we could turn on the light and suddenly have power again. And so I think that really showed the value of having a company like that on our side here. And I very much appreciate their continued support of Ideas. We're now in our 6th year of doing this, and it just shows their ability to want to invest in the future of Iowa. So I thank them very much for that. Iowa Ideas continues today. This is our last day. I don't know how many people caught our opening speaker, Simon Estes, the opera singer. That will be online eventually if you want to go back and watch that if you missed it. He grew up in Centerville. His grandfather was a slave. His father couldn't read or write and stressed him to get an education. And he has performed for presidents and the Queen, performed in every major opera house in the world, been very active in Africa. A very humble guy at 85 years old. It's an inspirational story. And then our closing keynote today, I think at 12:20, is legendary wrestling coach Dan Gable and Clarissa Chung, who is the incoming, now the coach for starting up the women's wrestling program at the University of Iowa. Both of them have challenges and a long ways to go, and we'll talk about that today. And our sports editor, J.R. Ogden, will moderate that discussion. So I hope everybody can join that as well. And there's more tracks between now and then. So I just want to thank everybody for being with us, panelists and our viewers as well. And thank you very much. I'll see you guys later.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks, Bob.